For as long as I can remember, I've always felt lost, lonely, unworthy, unwanted, alone, and ashamed. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, my parents were never home. They were always at work. You know, at that point in time, I resented them for it, only, to realize later that they were doing it to support me. I started getting molested when I was 5.5 years old. The person that was doing it told me that it was okay that he was doing it, and even if I did try to tell somebody, nobody would believe me. Around the same time, just a couple months later, my mom had my little sister. So I felt even more unwanted because the attention was on her. Of course, it's a little baby around. And then as I grew older, my parents loaded me with the responsibility. They still continued to work all the time. And I was the one responsible to get my sister up and ready for school. I was the one responsible for feeding her dinner. My parents were gone by the time we woke up in the morning, and they weren't home until well after we were in bed. I would wake up at times in the middle of the night and find that my parents would wake my sister up, to spend quality time with them, and that's when it all began. The molestation continued. I was still scared to tell anybody, and I started doing things to get my parents' attention. It first started, I started sneaking out, hoping that they would catch me, because any type of attention is better than no attention, even if it was bad. Well, either they never caught me or they just didn't care. So I progressed from there. I started running away. I would go stay with friends for 3 and 4 days at a time. And then when I got home, my parents would ground me, but they were never home enough to enforce the punishment. So I pretty much got to do what I wanted to do. And then at the age of about 11 or 12, I started smoking cigarettes, and I was stealing them from my parents, hoping that they would catch on just for the attention. Well, when they didn't catch on, or they didn't, bring it to my attention, it got worse. I started with, I went from stealing cigarettes and smoking them to stealing money from my parents, my family, my friends' parents, and it took my friends' parents catching me before I stopped, and when everybody found out what I was doing, nobody wanted anything to do with me, which made me feel even more unwanted. Then I started, feeling even, like I said, even more unwanted, and it progressed from there. I started breaking into houses. The third house that I broke into, the people came home and caught me. They called the cops on me, and the cops made me return everything. But they didn't prosecute me. They took me home. My parents didn't really discipline me for that. All they did was decide that we needed to move, maybe a fresh start. And all this time, the molestation still continued. At, this time, when I realized, when I was old enough to realize that what he was doing was not okay, I got to where I was threatening to tell. And he was telling me that he would kill me, and that I would be the one in jail for lying, for spreading rumors about somebody and trying to get somebody in trouble for something that they didn't do. So we moved to a bigger city, and right after I'd started school, I started getting really, really sick. So my mom took me to the emergency room, and they took urine samples, they took blood samples, they did everything. And about an hour and a half later, the doctor walked into the room, and he looks at me and he says, "Have you ever had sex before?" Well, still remembering what this person had told me, I told him no. And he looked at my mom and he said, "Well, we've tested her urine and we've tested her blood, and we've done it more than once, and it is showing up that she's pregnant." My mom told me straight out that she would let me continue to live in her house because she had no choice. She didn't want to put me in state care, but she disowned me. She didn't want anything to do with me. Then my mom started asking everybody for advice on what to do. Everybody was telling her that she needed to take me to have an abortion, and that's what she did. Well, from that point on, mine and my mom's relationship was really, really strained because my mom knew my beliefs, and I've always believed in, never believed in having an abortion, because to me that is murder. And so after I healed from that, things started getting even worse. I was getting into fights at school. I was back-talking teachers. I was throwing stuff at teachers. I was, the whole 9 yards. I had some neighbor kids that lived next door. They were twins, about 5 or 6 years younger than me. And I can remember on one occasion that I got a butcher knife out of my drawer, and I chased them around the yard with the knife. And when I couldn't catch them, I threw it at them, hoping that I would stab one of them and injure them, so I could be punished for what I did, what I considered was murder, for having the abortion. Things, just got worse from there. I got into smoking marijuana. I got into taking prescription pills. I got into a lot of stuff that nobody should ever, have to go through. When I didn't, nobody ever called the cops on me chasing the kids around or anything else, so I just felt like I was getting away with everything. About a week later, I walked up to the grocery store up the road from us where my grandmother worked, and I stole 63 packs of cigarettes, knowing that if you stole from anywhere, that they would put you in jail. And I felt like I was supposed to be punished. They didn't prosecute me because my grandmother had been an employee there for 20 years. From there on out, my parents still didn't seem to care. And then finally they decided that we were going to move again. And they moved us to a very small town. And my thought of it all was, well, they're thinking if they move me somewhere where there's nothing, then I can't get in trouble for anything. That's not true. I started hanging out with the wrong crowd. I started partying. I started getting drunk. And I was only 14 years old. My parents still didn't seem to care. Or at least I didn't think that they cared. I, was still getting into fights at school. I was getting suspended. I started selling marijuana at school. I started selling prescription pills at school and all of that. Well, at one point in time, I threatened to kill myself because I knew, I went to school and I threatened to kill myself because I knew that the school would have to contact somebody. And they did, and I got put in it's called Pinnacle Point Hospital. It's like a hospital for people with emotional problems, stuff like that. My sister was still getting, all the attention she wanted. She never did anything wrong in my parents' eyes. She was the perfect child. And all I was doing was screaming out for attention. When I was put in that hospital, I was in there for 4.5 months. My parents never came to visit me. I tried committing suicide while I was in there. I've tried overdosing on medication, trying to commit suicide, just hoping to get the attention that I wanted. I finally got out of there right before I was going to turn 16 years old. I got into a relationship with a guy, and when me and him got together, he was one of those people that didn't do any type of drugs. He was in school. He, always wanted to go to school, never got in trouble in school, which was completely opposite from me. So I thought, okay, well, it's a boy, maybe I'll get attention there. And just when me and my parents thought that everything was going great, I started getting abused. I started getting beat on. And I was getting the attention that I wanted, so I stayed in that relationship. I was in that relationship for 2 years, and we broke up, and then I was back to being lonely. I was back to feeling unwanted, unworthy. You know, I didn't deserve anything, and I met my now husband. When I was in my past relationship, it got to where I wasn't smoking marijuana. I quit taking prescription medicine. I was doing good, and I was going to school, and I was getting good grades in school. Then I met my now husband, and I went back to smoking marijuana. I went back to taking the prescription pills. We had sex the second day we knew each other. I moved in with him the third day that we knew each other, just because it was the attention that I'd always wanted. And things continued like that, and we found out that we were pregnant 4 months into our relationship, and I told him, I said, I want to quit everything because my child doesn't deserve any of this. She doesn't deserve having to have, her mom do drugs or take pills and then her end up suffering for it. So I stopped it all, and I had her, and then mine and his relationship changed dramatically. We weren't getting along. We didn't really have anything to do with each other. It was more like we were staying together because we had a kid. We were forced into marriage. His dad had said that he didn't want us to have a child and not be married. So his dad went to the justice of the peace and got our marriage license and went and got rings and took us up, or went to the courthouse and got our marriage license, took us to the justice of the peace and told us that we were getting married or he was taking our child away. So we got married. Then I was skeptical. We were forced into it. I never thought it was going to work. We were hit with many, many troubles. We ended up homeless. We ended up with nothing, nowhere to go. So I went and opened a checking account. And I didn't have any money I had the money to open the account, but I didn't have any money in the account. And I went around writing checks just to give us the basics of what we needed to survive. And then we were driving down the road fixing to go see my grandfather in the hospital who was dying and got pulled over. And we both went to jail. He had had a warrant for him, and I had 23 warrants for me. And while in jail, I realized that I was doing stuff that I shouldn't have done. Nobody deserved it. I didn't deserve it. My daughter didn't deserve it. My parents didn't deserve it. And when I got out of jail, I didn't think that me and Chris would still be together. But things changed. And we started getting along, but we were still being attacked. The prescription meds came back into place. I felt like I couldn't function without them. We moved from place to place to place. In the first year that my daughter was born and 6 months that we were married, we moved 24 different times. Just because we never fit in anywhere, nobody wanted us around, we were doing wrong, the whole 9 yards. Finally, we called his mother, and this was after my parents had kicked us out. We called his mom came and got us. She was married, and about a week after being with her, I went into labor. Her husband attacked me being pregnant, and Chris went and jumped all over him because he wasn't going to give us the vehicle to go to the hospital. Well, since his mom decided to go ahead and give us the vehicle, he, told his mom, her husband told her to get out because she chose us over him. So we ended up homeless again. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. They didn't want to let me go home. I signed myself out. But I got pregnant with my second child, and I had complications. They put me in the hospital when I was 3 months pregnant with her, and they didn't want to let me out of the hospital. I was anemic. I needed blood transfusions, didn't want anything to do with it. I had her, and she was in neonatal intensive care, and I automatically blamed myself. I thought I had done something wrong. So I got into, smoking marijuana, doing prescription pills, and then I got into harder drugs. Because I felt that if I did that, somebody would take my kids away. They deserved better. And it went on like this for many, many years. And I never thought it was going to get better. I've always been depressed. I was on all types of different medicine. Well, out of the blue, we decided that we were going to move from Arkansas to Springfield, Missouri. And when we got up here, we had people that would tell us, that would come and invite us to church, and never thought anything about it. What does church, what does church have for me? What's it going to give me? And, it can't make life any better, all that. So, and then certain people just kept coming by and kept coming by and kept coming by. So we looked at each other and said, okay, well, we'll go to satisfy these people, and then they'll leave us alone. On our first night in Freeway, we were sitting there listening to John preach, and I felt, I started feeling better. I started feeling butterflies in my stomach, but I thought maybe it was from the prescription medication that I had been taking, that I shouldn't have been taking. And I thought I was getting sick. So we left, when it was over. We stayed the whole time. When it was over, we left. We went home. Well, I looked at my husband the next the sermon that he preached that time, it hit me. I started crying. What he was preaching me. He was telling my story. Who I am, or who I was at that time. And then he did the altar call. This was on October 22nd, 2011. He did the altar call, and I went up there, crying my eyes out. I never had. I have now. It doesn't necessarily mean that, they're not biological, but they are my family. They're the closest thing to family that I felt that I've ever had. I've had many scares when it comes to medical problems. My health was really, really bad. And so, like I said, on October 22nd, I was saved. Since I've been saved, my life has made a complete 360 turnaround. The family that I never had, I have now. It doesn't necessarily mean that, they're not biological, but they are my family. They're the closest thing to family that I felt that I've ever had. I've had many scares when it comes to medical problems. My health was really, really bad, and I started praying, and I realized that my prayers were being answered. I went to the doctor, and they told me that they believed that I had cervical cancer, and they did some procedures on me. So I had a cancer scare, knowing that I had many of my families passed away from cancer. The test came back, and they said it wasn't cancer, but he still wanted to do some more tests just to make sure. And he had put in for a medical necessity because all my teeth were real bad from the drugs that I had done for my pregnancies because I didn't take care of myself. He put in a medical necessity to have that taken care of, and I got a phone call one day stating that they were going to, that it had been approved and they were going to take care of my mouth. That was an answered prayer in itself. I never, I figure, okay, that, that's my one miracle that's going to happen. After further tests for the cervical cancer, you know, he came back and told me that I had some other problems and that I needed to go through and have a hysterectomy. And I was really, really scared, never had a major surgery in my life. I came to church and I told my family what was going on and asked for prayers. My family prayed, and I knew that they prayed because all of my answers, you know, all of my fears, everything, I wasn't scared. I was still scared, but I wasn't as scared. You know, I knew I had people who were behind me. I knew I had people who cared about me. And I knew that if something, and my biggest fear is that I'm going to go into surgery and something bad's going to happen. And I knew, you know, I knew that if that did happen, that my family would be taken care of because I didn't want to leave them. Well, I had my surgery, and then the doctor came in the next day, and she told me, she said, I think that, you know, that there's cancer there. After, you know, being told that I had cancer, and then being told that I didn't have cancer, and I was being told that I possibly had cancer again. So I asked everybody to pray once again. I got the phone call, and she's told me that it wasn't. She said, I don't know, you know, she said it's a miracle because I could have swore you had it. And that's when I told her, I was like, I have a stronger power on my side. God's looking out for me. He, you know, he has a purpose for me being here. He's not ready to let me go yet. So, you know, in my whole entire story, in my whole entire life, all them times that I felt unwanted, and all them times that I felt unloved and alone and miserable, it was all because I didn't have one person. There was one person that I needed in my life the most, and I didn't want to accept him. And when I finally did, the hole in my heart was complete. The void in my life was complete. The hole in the pit of my stomach was filled. God has blessed me in many, many ways. And if it wasn't for him, I'm scared to know how my life would be now, if I would still be here, if I would still have my children, if I would still have my husband, if I would have, I know I wouldn't have the family that I have now. And if my story and letting people hear when I was saved, how I was saved, how my life was before I was saved, can save one person, then it's all worth it.